This is Tallulah, who goes by Tilly, and her buddy Theo is kind of, you can hear him in the background. He's walking around wondering why he's not allowed on the couch. This is their roadmap to success. Now, I think Tallulah, really, her issue is a lower self-esteem and lower confidence. I think part of it, I just saw, she was a little bit nervous and one of the guardians went over to pet her. Anything a dog's doing when we pet it is what we're enhancing or we're reinforcing. And if she's scared and we pet her, that's going to make her be more scared. So the better thing to do is if you see that she's a little bit nervous, if we could throw a treat and get her to move forward. Dogs get over things by literally moving forward. So if we can get her to move forward, that can help her. That's much bit more effective than petting her when she's nervous or scared or anxious or whatever the unbalanced state of mind is. Now, for Theo, because he's really the primary issue, now both of these dogs are still intact, and the guardians are debating whether or not they're going to breed them. I personally am not a big believer in, well, not believer, but I don't like to breed dogs for the experience because the first time I do anything, I'm not very good at it. And so I would leave that to professionals. But if we are going to do it, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it if you want to do it. But for a male dog, if they have their huevos, for lack of a better word, it can create some frustration because they can't use it, so to speak. And so the 3 times that you're going to have more of an impact on neutering a male is around 6 months of age, before a year, and then after 5 years. After 5 years, it just doesn't make a difference. Because he is territorial, and I think he's frustrated, and he's thinking that he's in charge of security, I think that neutering him will go a long ways towards helping. It's not going to solve his problem. It's going to make it easier for him to not feel as intense about doing his job. He thinks his job is to be in charge of security because he didn't have any rules or boundaries or structure. So we talked about some rules. One of the rules is she's not allowed, neither dog is allowed on the furniture. We're just doing this for the video. So if the dog gets up on the furniture, we're going to say off once. If the dog doesn't get off, we're going to grab this and escort them to the edge, but not pull them all the way off. I always want the dog to do the work. As soon as the dog gets off, I would pull out a treat and give her the treat and say the word off. We want to always end a correction with a positive. So if the dog gets off and we pet it and say off and something good happens, then in the future when we say off, the dog would get off expecting and to get that new thing or that favorable thing. Some of the other rules we went over would be to have to sit before it goes in or out of a door, both dogs. And if I say sit and Tallulah sits and Theo doesn't, then I would let Tallulah through the door. And then I would walk away from the door, wait 1 minute, and then come back and give Theo another opportunity to say it again, to do it the first time. The more we say a command to the dog, the less they're going to listen to it. So if I say sit, 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 sit. All right, so we're only going to say the command word 1 time. So if I go to the door and say sit and the dog doesn't sit, I'm going to walk away for 1 minute, and then after 1 minute, I'm going to go back to the door and tell it to sit again. If it doesn't sit this time, I'll walk away for 2 minutes, next time for 4 minutes, next time for 8 minutes. So just teaching the dog that I'm always going to expect you to do something for me in order to get what you want. And we're going to introduce a currency of basically obedience. Now, that would be another example of a rule. Another rule would be the dog should not be within 7 feet of anyone's eating. That's very rude in the dog world. That's a challenge for food. Let me see. So incorporating rules and structure and also delaying gratification will help the dog develop more self-control. Theo likes to play fetch. So in between each throw, I might make the dog sit and wait for a second, then I throw it. And he brings it back, he has to sit again. Sitting is a more subordinate position for dogs, so it can be helpful. But it also helps him think of, I have to pay for each throw, and I pay with, again, obedience. So if we find ways that we can ask them to delay gratification, we have to wait for permission to eat food. I'm going to sit and wait for permission to go through the door even though the door is open. All those things can help the dog develop more self-control. All right, I'd like to also have the guardians start petting the dogs with a purpose. Right now they nudge and tell the humans when to pet them, and they also are very physical. They jump up on the humans, they nudge them, get in their way. A general rule of thumb, I'd like the humans to get in the habit of not walking around the dogs. If the dog's in my way, I'm going to walk through the dog. The dog needs to learn it needs to defer and get out of your way. Now don't kick them or anything like that, but just don't slow down and don't stop and just walk through them as if they're not there. Now, after a while, the dog will start deferring, and again, that's more of a follower's mindset. I'd also like the guardians to stop petting the dogs for no reason, especially when it's demanded. Instead, if I want to pet Tallulah, I'm going to say sit, As soon as she sits, I'm going to pet her and say the word sit, especially if she jumps up or nudges me, because then she's telling me what to do. If I listen and comply when she tells me what to do, then that helps her think that she's in charge or responsible for me. And I think that's part of the reason that Theo is acting this way, is he thinks that his humans don't listen to him very well, so he has to be proactive and let people come in the house know I'm in charge by jumping up on them or nipping at them if they move around, or if the baby cries, he wants to nip the baby to say, hey, you're disturbing the peace. So all these things are related to him thinking he has more authority than he actually has. Petting with incorporating rules and boundaries and structure will help him identify more as a follower. And then petting with a purpose helps him identify, if I want something from the humans, I can't tell them or demand it, but I have to pay for it and ask for it nicely. After a while, what's going to happen is Theo's going to come and sit in front of the human saying, look, I'm prepaying for some attention. Can you scratch me behind the right ear? And we want to do that as much as we can. Now remember, the more words we say to our dog, the easier it is for them to get confused. So I say just the command word. If the dog sits, I pet it and say sit. If it lays down, I pet it and say chill. If it comes to me, I pet it and say come. And this is, after a while, like I said, he'll prepay for attention. Now, that leads me to passive training. Every time the dog does something that you want, a desired action or behavior, if we pet the dog and just say the command, after a while, the dog will start to seek out and display that behavior, because that's what gets attention. So every time Tallulah comes by and sits next to us, we're going to pet her and say sit. Every time she comes to us, we're going to pet her and say come. Or she lays down, we pet her and say chill, or whatever the word is. After a while, she'll start doing that faster and faster. When we're trying to teach a dog to do something, the hard thing is getting them to actually do it. Well, we're kind of cheating. We're just waiting for the dog to do it anyways, and just rewarding them, assigning a command word, and that makes them more likely to do it in the future. Petting with a purpose and passive training are probably the easiest things the guardians could do if everyone in a family gets in the habit of doing it. Now, if I come in the room and I see somebody's petting the dog and it's standing up, I might say the word paycheck. That means, hey, you're petting the dog without a purpose. So I immediately throw my hands up, tell the dog to sit. As soon as it sits, I pet it, preferably under the chin, and I say the word sit. Then I can tell my dad and say, Dad, I actually asked the dog to sit before you came in the room. Thanks for reminding me, but I was on top of it, because it gives you another opportunity to practice it. But if you argue about it, then the dog's like, oh, they're on their own page, I can be on my own page too. Now, because we have two beautiful girls in the house, girls like to play with dogs and pet and interact with them, we're going to use some positive reinforcement to help the kids help us practice good behavior with the dogs. So every time that one of the kids comes up and says, hey, I pet the dogs with a purpose, Mom and Dad is going to put a M&M or a Skittle into a little coffee mug or jar that they're going to make at a craft store. And then at the end of or if they do something that they're not allowed to do, they're petting the dog without a purpose, or they're petting the dog when it jumps up or when it's excited, then we take an M&M or a Skittle away. Then every day at dinner, we're going to dump those on our plate. We're going to count up and see who had the most Skittles. And then whoever had the most maybe doesn't have to clear the table or gets a special reward. And then we get to use those whenever Mom and Dad would like, maybe for dessert or after lunch the next day or whatever it is. Something I forgot to mention on camera, but I like to give dogs a naughty dog name. My name is David. My mom said David William, which is my middle name. I knew I was not getting chocolate cake. So if we always say Theo when he's doing something wrong, or say Theo when it's something right, he gets confused. Am I in trouble or not? So what I do, my puppy's name is Quest. If he's doing something I don't like, I call him Rufus. And so now when I say Rufus, he knows I'm not happy with him, and he kind of slinks away. Now, if it gets to the point where Rufus gets too heavy, I just throw away the word Rufus and I start calling him Trump, or whatever word I want to use. And this way we can separate positive from negative calls to the dog. It makes the dog more inclined to come when I do say come. Now, dogs respond to what they're doing at the time. If I'm telling the dog to come, and I say it a whole bunch of times, the dog doesn't come, and it finally comes to me, and I'm like, next time you come, you better come when I tell you to come. It's like, when I did come, you punished me. So even if the dog is being obstinate and defiant, when it does come to you, make sure you reward it richly and just say just the command word. Not even good come, just the word come. Also avoid using good dog or good girl or good boy, because those don't really mean anything specific to the dog. You'll make more mileage by simply saying come or sit or crash or chill or whatever the word is. All right, what else did we go over? In the video, we explained how to claim the area around the door. I'd like members of the family to practice that at least twice a day. And the best way to practice it with family or friends, so we know who it is that's coming over, they can call or text us ahead of time. So practice that at least twice a day. And eventually we're going to start be able to move the items away from the door, and the dog will respect the line. You might want to think about putting painter's tape down where the line is so the dog knows where it is, and you can remove it in dashes like I mentioned off camera. I'd also practice this in the kitchen. And again, practicing while the activity is going on is not a very good time to practice it. So maybe mom goes to the kitchen and microwaves a piece of roast beef and simulates like she's cooking, and then establishes the boundary and tells the dog, you can't be in the kitchen while I'm cooking. And we're doing this just by reheating some lunch meat, so we don't worry about it. If we're actually cooking a souffle, we're worried about it falling, overcooking and doing all the rest of those things. So the more that we can actually focus and recreate scenarios and help the dog practice the behavior for each individual step, now we're training the dog. This is the behavior that I expect when somebody comes to the door. This is the behavior I expect when you're eating or cooking food. You can do the same thing with the dinner. A lot of my clients who use the positive reinforcement with the M&Ms and the Skittles, when they go to the dinner, before they actually serve dinner, because these dogs like to be under the table, which is, again, very disrespectful. Maybe we sit down at the table, it's all set for dinner, and we put down the cups and we count up our M&Ms while mom and dad teach the dogs that they're not allowed to come across the line. I would probably try to establish it so the dogs have to stay on the carpet here, right behind where the camera is. We have hardwood floor, and that's where the dining room is. So that makes a nice, easy line of delineation. We're also probably going to have a piece of wood that we're going to use to create a gauntlet by the door that I talked about off camera. This can help just create another illustration of you need to stay in this area when when somebody's at the door or when we're eating food at the table. Let me see what else. Avoid shoving the dogs. Instead, if the dog's on the couch and won't listen to you, show it that you have a treat and toss the treat on the ground. And when the dog gets on the ground, then say the word off. Also, we have a dog bed over here. What I would suggest is we assign a command word and teach the dog to go to the dog bed on command. The way I do that is first I show the dog I have a treat, and then I toss it onto the dog bed. I let the dog go up, and the second it touches it with its lips and picks it up, I say the word beach or whatever the command word we want to use for the dog bed is. After a while, the dog is going to start checking it out. Now, the next step is I take a treat and I leave it on the dog bed, just in the middle of the dog bed, and I don't say anything. I just hear and watch. As soon as the dog goes over and gets it, I say the word beach, or whatever the command word is. After a while, the dog starts going over the dog bed because every time I go over there, something good happens. So we're creating, again, a positive reinforcer, and we're creating a conversation or a way of communicating with our dogs to give them some direction at different times. Now, because the dog likes to get on top of the baby or wants to correct the baby when the baby's crying, I would suggest getting a little bit of an area rug in here in front of the couches. And when anybody's here with the baby, the dog, if the baby is protesting and the dog is reacting, we have to move the dog away, and the dog's not allowed to come onto the area rug. Eventually, we'd like Theo to be able to come and hang out near us, but not while he's being reacting. So that will help with that. And then there was something else I was going to go over. Now I'm drawing a blank. I will remember it shortly. When we're eating or when we're feeding the dogs, remember that it's important that we feed the dogs in the order of rank. They eat in the order of their authority. So it's important for the human who's feeding them to eat first. Then we're going to give the dog permission to eat after we eat, and one at a time. Now, the way I do that is when the dog takes the first bite, I would give a different command word for each dog. So maybe when Theo's eating, we say feast. And every time he takes that first bite, we say feast. We do that over and over, and again, after a month or two, when we say feast, Theo goes over and he knows that means I have permission to eat my food. Maybe for Tallulah, maybe we say, chow or grub or supper or another word that's unique just for her. And by, again, saying it when the dog grabs the first bite, it's going to take a little bit of time, but eventually that word only means something to that particular dog. Oh, I did remember. So the last thing I want to talk about is sometimes Theo likes to correct and nip our camera woman here when she's over here with her friends. Not her, but her friends. If her friends, one of her friends is very, sometimes she is very loud, and Theo comes over and tries to correct her. Or the kids might be dancing or wrestling around here, and then he comes over and tries to nip them for that. Well, what I would suggest we do is get a bully stick. Normally I would use a treat and use some counter conditioning by letting them chew on the treat, but these guys have underbites. Tallulah is racked out asleep. So what I would do is hold on to a bully stick. Now this is basically, when I do this, I talk to our camera woman here about recreating a dance, a routine that we can do over and over again. Now, to start out with this, what I would do is make sure that Theo has had a nice little long walk before we do this and take out a lot of his excess energy. I call this putting the dog in a position to succeed. Once we've done that, bring him back inside. I normally say wait for the dog to stop panting, but he is a thick dog, so he pants a lot. But give him about 10-15 minutes to recover and cool down. Then what I would do is move him to where maybe the Harley-David popcorn machine is across the room, put him on a leash, and then pull out a bully stick. Let him start chewing on it. Let him get into it first. So give him about a minute to chew it, and you're just holding on to it. And I would get like a package of 6-inch bully sticks. Now, I would recommend getting the odor-free bully sticks. They have some other ones that are thicker, but they will give your dog all sorts of crazy gas, which you don't want. So just get the odor-free ones, or you can probably order on Amazon. So once he gets really into it, then we're going to have, our camera woman here is going to have come up with a dance routine. Now, at first, maybe one of the moves is like, and you can laugh all you want at home because I am a horrible dancer. But that movement is too much, and that might cause him to come over. So what we want to do when we're practicing it, while he's chewing on the bully stick, while he's looking at the girls here, the girls might go in slow motion, go. So we're going to recreate the dance move in very slow motion. And we're going to do this so that he can watch it over there without reacting. Eventually we can go a little bit faster. And eventually we can do really, and we're doing all the effervescent stuff, and we're clapping, we're making all the noises, but he is conditioned not to interact or interfere with that because he's chewing on the bully stick. Now, once we can do this where you're at full motion with him way over by the Harley-Davidson popcorn machine, then I would have him come one step closer and then try to get it full motion. But if at that point he stops showing interest in the bully stick and wants to come over, then we would go back to going in slow motion and help him practice at that distance until we go full motion, then take another step closer. This is a very methodical process. This might take you 10, 15, 20 practices, but eventually he can be right here watching the girls jump and do around, and he's not going to think that it's his job to react because he's been desensitized. And we use the principle of something good, being able to chew this bully stick while he's watching that go on. Okay, so I'm probably forgetting some other things. If the guardians forgot, if they have any questions, they can always reach out to me. I have just a huge volume, a library of all sorts of educational videos on doggonpumps.com. If you click on the section that calls Dog Training Tips, up on the left side of the page, there's going to be a search box. You can type in door exercise, escalating consequences, dog bed, counter conditioning, whatever the exercise is, and I'll have a whole bunch of videos there that the guardians can watch that I've done with other clients that will provide them with some more instruction. If they forget I hung up on anything, just like I tell all my clients, they can always call me. Texting me is going to be by far the fastest way to reach me. All right, that's the end of our session for Tallulah and Theodore. Remember, everything that you do trains your dog. Only sometimes you mean it.